for the Department of Education and the State Board of Ed, and I'm filling in for Sean.
Thanks.
And then if it's okay, I'm just going to go for the way that I see them on my screen. So Keith Krempel is here with us. He is a program approval coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
And Dr. Juanita Ashby-Bay is our other program approval coordinator. She is with us. Nicole Crowder, you all know, she is the assistant for this board. And Miss Sophia Fitzpatrick is the director of licensure. And Miss Tamara DeShields Burns is the manager of the Office of Licensure. I think I got everybody on my team.
Sounds good. All right, well, let's dig right in for the sake of time. Do we have any public comment today?
I don't believe so. Nicole?
No, we don't have any today.
Okay. Cool. State board update.
So today, Mr. Hands is not able to join us. He was double booked. He is going to provide something in writing, and I will provide that to the board as soon as I have it. So apologies that we are not able to do that at this time.
No problem.
And as far as the legislative update, Melita, she cannot join us until 10. So if it's okay to flip the next two, that would be ideal.
Yep, let's go to, let's approve the March minutes first, because sometimes we can get a little lengthy in our communication update. So let's take a look at the March minutes. They were sent out with the materials. Let's just take a minute or two to review them one more time before we take a motion to approve them.
So Melita, I have a question about one of the items on the minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So under the approved proposed agenda for April, the last bullet says discussion of the 180-day requirement.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to get away from that because it's not what it is called. Like Kelly always corrects me when I appreciate it. It's equivalent to that of a school year. Could that be in there too? I'm fighting so hard with my team at school to try to get them to get on board with that too. And I feel like if we can have that just consistent, it'll make things a little easier for all of us. I don't want to be picky,
Yeah.
but does that feel right?
No, I mean, I think that that's how we're discussing it. But then, I mean, I think it's changing our mindset and language with it too. And it's just kind of calling an equivalent of a school year. I would probably call that a happy, glad change. So Kelly, can we just update that in a minute? It's just the wording of it, the term.
Absolutely. I just changed it to discussion of the practicum requirement.
Awesome.
Okay?
Thank you.
Any other revisions or edits to the March minutes?
My name is misspelled, so if you could just add an extra I in there.
Okay.
Got it. Thank you, and apologies.
Any other revisions or edits? So without objection, we will approve the March meeting minutes with the revisions and corrections that were stated. Okay. March minutes approved. All right, so with our any announcements, let me go back to here. So now I'm going back to our announcements and communication update. Before we get to the communication update, are there any announcements? I feel like Dr. Gartland?
Just have a question. How's Sean?
So I think that Sean would be happy for me to announce that his wife delivered a beautiful baby girl. Her name is Julia. And for anyone who's interested, I do have pictures and they are adorable. And I'm happy to share them with everybody. She and mom are doing well. And as you can imagine, knowing Sean, he is in daddy heaven. So sad he's not here. So very happy for him. Congratulations to he and his wife.
Yes, Kelly, please share
Definitely, yeah.
definitely the pictures. I feel like we all went through this pregnancy and we deserve to see our baby. we deserve to see our PSTEB baby. All right.
Knowing Sean, he's watching.
Right. It's watching. Any other announcements? No other announcements? All right. So communication update. I wanted to kind of clarify and take a moment, and we might have to start this discussion, stop it, get our legislative update, and then come back to this discussion, just giving everyone a heads up. Just a little bit about what happens to the communication update. So yes, I do use this time to update you on things or communications and conversations that I've had in between meetings, but this is also a time as board members that you can share what's going on with your jurisdiction, relay information back from your stakeholders. And so we are going to use this time, but we may have to come back to this time again to talk about the practicum requirement. Wanted to kind of discuss it, and it was something we talked about in the February meeting, and we were supposed to discuss it in a March meeting in greater detail, but we really didn't do that. So I do want to make sure we have the opportunity, and that was some of the quote unquote homework that was assigned to the board members to kind of go back and get some information or thoughts and feelings about the practicum requirements, so we can start the conversation here, but know that we do have a legislative update, as Kelly had said at the beginning, at 10, and then also too, because Dr. Shockley and Dr. Allen aren't here, I do want to give them the opportunity to kind of share their thoughts and feelings from their stakeholder groups in terms of the practicum requirement. So we may start the conversation, and I don't want it to feel redundant in May, but because they're not here, and then they had some things that they wanted to share with the board, I do want to make sure that they do have the opportunity to do so. Before Dr. Gartland, before I get to you, one thing I wanted to discuss, because I'm noticing some things in our last couple of meetings, and Kelly, please help me out with this, because I think I can do this, but I'm not 100% sure. The difference, what the board represents in PSTEB, and then there's the regulatory side of PSTEB, and then the guidance, and sometimes these are merging together in our meetings, and they're really two distinct things in terms of PSTEB. I feel like some of our conversations have been more of the seeking guidance from MSDE, and that's not really what we do. We're more in terms of the regulatory side of what's going on with pre-service and in-service teachers. And so, Kelly, I'm going to ask you, because I feel like I'm going to totally mess it up, to talk about just briefly regulatory versus guidance in terms of PSTEB and MSDE, just to clear up any misconceptions that any board members may have, and kind of bring us back into focus and center in terms of what our charge and what we do.
Absolutely. And it's a great time to do this, I think, because we do still have, board members that are fairly new, and we may have to do it again in a few months because we have some vacancies, and we will hopefully have some new members joining us, excuse me. So I think it's to kind of, as Melita said, bring us back to focus on the charge. This board, the Professional Standards Board, the charge of this board, the purview of this board is educator preparation and licensure, right? So making sure that we're preparing educators that are ready for our classrooms, and that they are licensed appropriately based on research and best practices. Once and how that is done is through code, right? It's done sometimes through the law, as we've seen with the blueprint. We've seen more statutory language surrounding educator preparation and licensure than probably we've ever seen before in this state. And then there's also regulation. And the purpose of regulation is to, and Elliot will correct me if I'm wrong or if I'm not explaining this right, but in my view, regulations, the purpose of regulation is really to clarify what isn't clear in the law. So if the law is crystal clear, I would argue that there's no need for regulation, right? Because we're just regurgitating the regulation. But sometimes the law isn't as clear. And so the department that is charged with those regulations surrounding that statute will draft a regulation to clarify, or maybe it's a process associated with that particular law. There's a couple of different reasons why we might put regulations in place. This board, along with your sister board, the State Board of Education, that's what you do for educator preparation and licensure is we promulgate regulations. And then once those regulations are promulgated, the department is charged with ensuring that all of the constituents understand those regulations and know how to implement those regulations. So that's really when we get into guidance, technical assistance. If we've written the regulations well, we shouldn't need too much interpretation and policy memoranda, but sometimes that is necessary. Sometimes we do have to interpret regulations or clarify regulations. And in that case, we've done a lot lately in the last couple of months. We've gone through the regulations that we've just adopted, and we've made corrections and we've made clarifications, and you're going to see more of that today, right? So really we should be doing that. But in the meantime, it is our role at the Department of Education to provide guidance and technical assistance. It is, I think as Melita had alluded to, it would be unfair to ask the members of this board to provide guidance and technical assistance because that is not your charge, that is not your expertise. So I think that it's completely fair and reasonable when a question comes up to this board, if it is more a guidance question, to funnel that question to the MSDE. I think that's what you were saying, Melita. Did I describe that?
Yeah, because I think sometimes we are just kind of taking notes and looking at our conversations. I think it's a lot of, this needs to be fleshed out and things like that. And it's more of a guidance or wanting MSDE to make a decision or to say this or to say that. And that's not really our role. And just really looking at some of our conversations with that, it's just like, well, that's more of a guidance thing. That's not more of a regulatory thing. So I just want to make sure that we're clear on our charge and what we do and what we don't do. I mean, I think that we can make suggestions, but sometimes the suggestions are really out of our purview of what we actually do. So I just wanted to make sure that, and so because the board is sometimes in terms of when we get new members and how long you've been on the board, and if you've been, at the beginning of a regulation when we started straight from scratch, you understand a lot more of it once you kind of go through. But sometimes it's like, well, we want MSD to make a suggestion and keeping in mind our stakeholder groups and the groups that we represent. And it's just like, well, we're thinking more broad in terms of all 24 LEAs and all the IHEs and not just our specific group that we may represent. So I just want to make sure that we are thinking more broad and versus our specific situation with things. Mr. Bolson, Dr. Bolson? Oh, you're on mute.
Okay, sorry. My question is, so there's the traditional role of PSTEB, but then I also understand that the blueprint changed the function of PSTEB a little bit. So I'm actually a little curious sort of what the distinction is between that traditional role and sort of what the blueprint put on this entity, because I feel like it changed a little bit. I know it might be history for a lot of people, but it is something that's kind of curious for me.
No, that's an absolutely great point. So what we now see throughout the blueprint law is the word consultation. And in fact, the entire subtitle of the blueprint at the very end of the subtitle, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit. We have a blueprint priorities agenda item where we'll discuss this further. It does say that the State Board of Education is still the board that is charged with regulating and adopting the language having to do with many sections of the blueprint where it's not educator preparation or licensure. However, it also says that it will be done in consultation with the Professional Standards Board. So that is a new paradigm, and we haven't had something in several months come through. I think the last thing that this board was consulted on was the National Board Incentive Program regulations, and that I believe was in August or July of last year. So as regulations are drafted for other parts of the blueprint, like induction, for example, because I know that that's coming, it will come to this board at some point for consultation prior to the state board taking action. So yes, that is a new paradigm.
So that actually maybe puts us in a spot where we're providing
Feedback.
guidance more so than just straight up regulatory language. And
You
guidance may not be the right word, but yeah.
You can absolutely provide regulatory language for consideration. So Dr. Bolton, I'm not sure if you had joined the this board before when we had the last round, but this board did make suggestions about the language for those national board incentive regs, and some of those changes were made and the state board agreed with them. Some of them were not. So the
I think
feedback.
I just missed that, so.
I think you did
Yeah.
too.
I think that just being on this board, and for those of us who have been here for a number of years, it wasn't always like that. The collaboration between the two boards is amazing at this point. There's lots of conversations between myself and Mr. Crawford, and so there's conversations back and forth. And so when you look at the makeup of our group, we are composed of educators in multi ways in terms of our level of expertise, and that's very much respected by the state board chair in terms of what we know, what we're experiencing. And so those conversations that we have are great. And then there is more of a open door, maybe Kelly's the best way to say it, that how we can have these conversations. There's an open invitation for me as chair to join the board members, to join the state board meetings as an agenda item, as on the agenda, versus just being a guest. So we do have that. There's a lot more collaboration between the two boards, and it was not always that way. So that is the biggest difference. So when different things are coming that has to do with the the educator licensure and the practicum, there are conversations being had. And sometimes the question is like, Melita, what does this look like for the average classroom teacher? Or, hey, I know you have people on your board on higher ed. What does this mean for them? Just to get a little bit of insight of what we know and looking at our robust discussions. And so the consultation piece changed a lot, but the conversations were already being had, and now they're just more formalized. And so there is a great working relationship between the two boards, and that was not always true. Any other questions with that piece, the regulatory versus guidance? I'm going to table that so we can get our legislative update, and then we can kind of come back to the communication update, if that's okay with everyone. All right, we are ready for our legislative update.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you all again. Would someone be able to share screen privileges? If not, I can also just kind of talk through them if that's easier.
Simba, are you able to give Laurel and me screen sharing privileges?
Laurel, you may already have it because this is Zoom. And so if you go to the bottom, you'll see there's a share screen button.
I don't have it.
Oh, that's interesting. I have it.
Participant screen sharing.
I just clicked on it and it just says the host has disabled it.
Mm-hmm. That's what I'm saying too.
So Laurel, everybody, just so you know, everybody does have a copy.
Gotcha. Then let's just get started and that works for me. If you all have that document available, I was just going to run through the list of bills that we had been tracking related to teacher certification and preparedness, and then show you kind of where those ended up, how they kind of finished out in the legislative session. As you all likely know, session concluded on Monday. And so we have now a little bit of a lull period as we await as they are sent to the governor and signed into law. And then, of course, we'll start thinking about implementation and such as we go. So the first bill on our list was House Bill 75, Senate Bill 377. So yes, just another note that most of this is all legislation that you guys have seen before and that we've discussed. So I'm just going to run through kind of where this all ended up. So the first one was higher education, teacher retention and development program. Both versions of this bill passed in both chambers and with matching amendments. So they are all set to go to make those slight changes to the teacher development and retention program, that pilot program that had launched last session 2023. Senate Bill 143 was our teachers' retirement and pension systems reemployment. So this one allowed that flexibility for schools to rehire their retirees at the central office level or just positions outside of the school building. So this one was also passed in both chambers, and it was actually already sent to the governor on Tuesday, April 9th, and was signed into law officially. We have next Senate Bill 84, House Bill 116. This was teacher degree apprenticeship. So if you all remember, MSC had originally submitted a letter of information because we weren't included in the bill in a holistic way. We wanted to make sure that there was more coordination specified with MSDE to oversee any kind of teacher apprenticeship program that would be working with high school students or college students specifically to ensure that it aligned with all the processes that are already in place and regulations and statutes already in place for teacher certification. So we had worked with the bill sponsor, Senator Rosapep, and he had accepted the amendments that we put forward just to make sure that layer of coordination was in place. Ultimately, SB 84 did cross over successfully and it passed in the Senate, but it did not pass in the opposite chamber. So it won't be moving forward this year. I'm just going to pause there and see if anyone had any questions and then we can move forward.
I'm just checking to make sure I didn't miss anyone in terms of, I don't think we had any questions so far. If I miss you, please just come off of mute because I'm like updating my notes and things like that.
All right, so we can go to Senate Bill 771, House Bill 945. So this was our initial teacher certification bill. As we had discussed previously, MSC worked closely with the state board, with the AIB, with MSEA, who had originally put forward the bill, just to make sure that the final product aligned with all of our goals mutually. So we had provided testimony, and a set of amendments that were ultimately accepted. So that enabled us to move from a position of support amendments to just flat out support, which was awesome, a wonderful collaborative effort. So the final version of this legislation did pass in both chambers, and it did incorporate those amendments offered by MSDE and the AIB, and it will be sent to the governor for signature in the coming weeks. So the next one is Senate Bill 937, House Bill 1157. This was the Grow Your Own Educators Grant Program. So this had originally been designed to be a $5 million grant that would be administered by MSDE. You would have those collaboratives applying for the grant. So an IHE, a local school system, a teachers union, or another body representing employees. And they would work together to apply to the department and secure funding so that they could help their education support professionals advance and get that, enter the classroom as teachers and earn their certification, have that paid for by MSDE or by this grant program. we had worked on amendments to also include our conditionally licensed teachers, referred to as provisional teachers, in the final language of the bill. And those amendments were accepted. They did also place a cap on how many conditionally licensed teachers would be able, or rather a cap on the funding that could go to conditionally licensed teachers as opposed to ESPs. So 25% of the funding would hypothetically be allotted for conditionally licensed teachers to ensure that there is still a robust amount left for our education support professionals. So those amendments were accepted alongside a few other changes. But ultimately, the bill, while it did pass, they had changed that language, mandating that the governor appropriate $5 million in the annual budget bill. So they removed the $5 million and they had changed that to a May. So where it sounds now is that this program is, signed into law, but it doesn't have a specific funding allocation, which, might be reopened at a different legislative session or come back into play next year. But as it is now, those collaboratives can apply to other funding sources that they identify, federal grants, what have you, and the department will provide technical assistance in those situations. But there isn't specific money set aside for it, although both versions did pass in both chambers. So we'll be going to the governor for signature. House Bill 1191, this was Interstate Teacher Mobility Compact. So while MSCE did support this bill, and there had been some talk of whether it would advance or whether it would be paired with that initial teacher certification legislation, ultimately, the bill did not pass in its original chamber. So it didn't meet that crossover deadline, and it did not advance and was not cross-filed. So it will not move forward this year. So the blueprint bill had undergone several amendments related to, because it was expansive and it had, ties to childcare and pre-K and the state CTE goals. But specific to this group, we had discussed in its relationship with the National Board Certification Fee Incentive Program, and opening that up to admin and our instructional specialists. So MSC had supported this bill, and that language remained through and through that final version. This legislation, HB 1426, did pass in both chambers, so it will also be sent to the governor for signature. And there were no major changes to that specific piece of it. HB 1326 was another one we had touched briefly on before that crossover deadline. It had intended to kind of boost the research and the work that was done around retention and support policies, guidelines, training that LEAs would have to provide for our teachers in those first few years. We had noted in our last meeting that this work was already underway at the department, and it was essentially completed in 2023 through that established work group, that Maryland Teacher Induction Work Group, led by Kelly and several other folks. And so we viewed a lot of what was in the bill as having already had a place in the work that MSDE was doing. The bill ultimately did not cross over at that original juncture at March 18th. And so it did not move forward this session either. Okay, and then our last one was HB 1386. This started out as a very different bill that included a study, a Holocaust education study, to look into all of social studies curriculum and assessments and materials, and specifically as they relate to Holocaust education. And so that was amended largely. It underwent very significant amendments. And what the final version of the bill, as you can see, it says, it requires MSDE to develop guidelines for an anti-bias training program for school employees. So they should be inclusive, include lessons in cultural awareness and to reduce implicit bias. So it has kind of all these specifications of what they want this training to include. It also asks that MSCE incorporate lessons specific to incidents of bullying and harassment that have happened across schools, of course, in deference to student privacy and making sure that that is maintained as we incorporate it into the training. They make another kind of specific allowance that if many LEAs already have that employee anti-bias training in place or a training of that nature that already exists, that whatever guidelines MSCE creates, they can just measure it alongside, you know, the training that they have already in place and make adjustments as necessary, and that they won't necessarily have to build out a brand new training if something of this nature already exists. The legislation does not give any sort of timeline for when MSDE would have to have these guidelines created by. And so, you know, naturally, we've just got it. So we don't know exactly when this will be released. But from whatever guideline, whatever framework MSCE creates, then we would go hand that off to the LEAs, the county boards of education, rather, and then they would build out a specific training for their school employees, anyone that frequently interacts with students, so that it can be more specific to their group of educators and of staff. So this, of course, also passed in both chambers and will be sent to the governor for signature.
Melita, can I make a comment?
Yes, sorry, I was on mute, Sandy. Go ahead.
That's okay, because I clicked on that bill as we were talking about that last bill, and it actually says in the state law, it says the department in consultation with professional standards and teacher education board shall develop guidelines for an anti-bias training program for school employees.
The final enrolled version of the legislation hasn't been posted yet, but in the round of amendments that had took place in the Senate, they had removed the PSTEB because it was outside the purview of which areas PSTEB usually consults with the department on. And so you'll see in the final bill that should be posted hopefully by the end of the week that it removed that section.
Okay, because I'm seeing everything else crossed out, but I'm seeing that
Right.
That's still okay.
Yes.
And then Sandy, we're gonna I'm sorry, Laurel, to cut you off. And then Sandy, we're gonna talk about that a little bit later down the agenda.
Okay.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying it's that, and then there's like two other small changes that you'll see in the final version as well.
Thank you.
Any questions, concerns, clarification on any of the bills that were discussed? Amy?
Yeah, I just have a clarifying question, and I apologize if this is redundant. But
Nope, don't apologize. Nope, no apologies needed. Go ahead.
for Senate Bill 771, we might talk about this later. Now that teacher prep programs aren't required to have students pass a portfolio-based assessment for graduation, does that mean that those seeking certification would have to do a teacher induction program? So it's one or the other?
The answer to your question is not a simple one, and it's not a yes or no answer, I should say. I've talked with the chair, and I think that it would be a great idea for us to really dig into this particular bill during the May meeting and do a deep dive into all of it, because along with that, we will have to look at altering two of our regulations that were just adopted. So my plan, I know I'm jumping the gun a little bit, was to bring a presentation in May and follow it with the regulatory language to realign to that new, what will be the law.
Any other questions or concerns with anything? All right. Well, as always, thank you, Laura, for that update. Thank you for that.
Of course. Have a good one. See y'all.
All right, so now we finished that. Let's go back to our communication. Let's go back to our communication update. We're all over the place with our agenda, but we do have some time. So before we had the legislative update, we were talking about regulatory versus guidance and like where we were with things. And so now kind of going back to that in terms of any updates that board members want to share. We are going to get to that. Why can't I think of the name of that bill? That's the one that takes PSTEB out of, I'm sorry, what number was that? I can't think of the number. The one we just discussed that Sandy brought up in terms of PSTEB developing that. We're going to discuss that later. And then in terms of the bill, we're going to take a deep dive into next month. We all have all of that, but any communication update, questions or concerns in terms of the practicum requirements. So Dr. Gartland, did you have something? I thought I saw your hand and then we stopped and legislative update. So I want to make sure I got back to you.
Thanks. Yeah. And I was just going to say the moment had passed, but since you brought it up, I just wanted to tell you that since Ebony and Keisha has come on as the other two besides me, the MACT reps, we've divided our homework. So the message did get back to the board and both of them actually sit on the MACT board. So I haven't heard what the results is, but I know that MACT had taken our homework seriously a couple months ago and they do have something to report. I just don't have it. So.
Yeah, and I noticed that Dr. Allen, Dr. Shockley aren't here. So
Right.
what we discuss now, just know that we will probably have the discussion again in May because they aren't here today. And I do want to make sure that if it was something to be shared, that it is shared with the board.
Thanks. And I will definitely get in touch. I mean, it's unusual that they're both not here. So I'll get in touch with them just to make sure that if something happens, they're not there. It's a busy time for higher ed in May, but I'll make sure that I have it, the report too. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or, and even when we say communication, this is also a great time to ask questions for clarification. There are no dumb questions or stupid questions here. And sometimes you have to ask the same thing over and over again. So it makes sense. I mean, looking at regulations and things like that, just sometimes it takes a couple of times to wrap your head around it to make sure that, you understand it. Any other questions or concerns in terms of practicum requirements or anything with that? Portfolio-based assessment, clarification with that? All right, going once. Okay, no. At any time you can bring that back. So just know that the communication update will be a time that I'll share conversations and things that have been going on with me as a chair, or Darren may share as a co-chair. But this is also a time for you to share anything that we need to know or you want to share with us as a board in terms of your stakeholders and your constituents.
So Melita, this is Joy. Is this where, am I okay to ask my question now?
I was going to you next. Yeah, go ahead, Joy.
I didn't know if I had to be about the practicum or something.
No. This is a time, sometimes just having this conversation or just even clarifying if something was said last meeting and it doesn't 100% make sense, please ask.
Okay.
Because that way we can clarify it. And for those of us who've been on the board for a while, it may make sense to us, but as a newer board member, maybe not so much. So,
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, mine is regarding the social work, school social work license. And I know in the old regs it had the 3 credits of special ed. I brought that up in the November 2022 meeting about needing special ed requirements. But social workers received an SPC in the old regs, and they were given 5 years to complete the 3 credits of special ed. Now the requirement is the same. You still need 3 credits of special ed, but social workers are not allowed to receive an initial license unless they have the 3 credits of special ed. That was not why I brought up the special ed requirement. It was my understanding that they would have the 5 years to complete the 3 credits of special ed. This will be a huge detriment to getting social workers, school social workers and non-publics and anywhere actually, because I don't even know if the state the Board of Social Workers is offering social work special ed classes. So I just wanted clarification on that, Kelly, if you could. I tried to talk to Scott. We tried to talk to Alex. They said to bring it up in here. So that's what I'm doing. So if you could just clarify for me why they were given a SPC in the old regs, and now they're not allowed to have one until they complete the special ed.
And then SBC, does that,
Standard Professional Certificate.
when they had that clarification for everybody? This is a lot of acronyms.
Sorry.
You're
I just
fine.
assumed everybody knew.
You're fine. You're fine.
Sure. So in the old regulations, and to be clear, this is not just about social workers. This is about every single specialist in every every single administrator and supervisor area. So in the regulations that were previously in place, the requirement that each one of those licensure areas or certification areas at the time have 3 semester hours of special education coursework to earn licensure was in place for decades. However, a very long time ago, I was not around for it, so I can't tell you the impetus, except probably a conversation similar to this one, in that it was difficult to hire, right? Because those individuals typically do not have a 3-credit special ed course when they come into the education field. The decision was made to issue a policy memorandum that allowed those specialists and administrators to get the credential, the professional credential, and at the first renewal, they are required to provide that course. That policy cannot trump regulation. So what we were doing is our practice was going against regulation, and we were allowing an initial requirement to be presented at renewal. When we did this round of repeal and replacement, we actually had stripped that requirement out for the specialists and administrators, because in the renewal requirements, we have that requirement that at every single renewal, some of the content of that renewal has to incorporate working with students with special needs. At the, I believe, October 2022 meeting, I don't think it was 23, it must have been 22, but it could have been 23. I'd have to go back and look. This board asked MSDE to put those requirements back in. So for every specialist and administrator area, we re-embedded that requirement that the 3 credits come for initial. So that's where we are, and the regulations were adopted as such. And will it create a barrier? It will. I know we have some LEA. I know Dr. Bolson is on the line. I don't want to put him on the spot. I know that Ms. Spain has already spoken out. We will have issues recruiting social workers, potentially school counselors, potentially school psychologists, potentially, I hope not, but in the real world, administrators. You know, do we see administrators who come in and don't have a special ed class? I sure hate to tell you the answer is yes, but the answer is yes. So what is MSDE doing? MSDE is doing a couple of things. One, we're creating a course. So we recognize this barrier. We're working internally to create an asynchronous modular course that will be online. It's not going to be ready tomorrow. Second thing we're doing is we have put together a list of every single course in every college and university in Maryland that will suffice for this requirement, as well as our continuing professional development credits. And that list is ready and is getting ready to be published. It may even be published. So at least having some resource to provide that individual when we have to say, this is what the barrier is for you right now. We cannot issue the license. You can choose from this list. So we have taken steps knowing that this would happen. With that being said, if a regulatory change is something that this board wants to pursue, I'm happy to discuss that or bring back language. I will follow your lead.
Kelly, can I ask a question? This is Dr. Taylor.
Absolutely.
Okay, as far as administrators go, especially administrative preparation for assistant principals, didn't at one time because I know at Bowie, we had to add a special education course to the curriculum so that they would have that.
Yes, yes, ma'am. You remember correctly. So for Maryland approved specialist and administrator programs, we require that course or 3 credits to be embedded into the program. But you know better than most that we import a significant amount of our workforce. So unless they are being prepared in Maryland in a specialist program or an administrator program, they will not have that. They could potentially not have that special ed credit. The social workers, I think, you know, the reason that Joy is highlighting them is because we know that they are not coming out with the special education course. It's not a part of their master's program because that is not approved through our office. That is not a Maryland approved educator preparation program. They work with the Department of Health and the Board of Social Work Examiners. So it is an additional class for them, always.
Any other questions for this?
Thanks for that clarification.
So Kelly had just said, like, we can, as a board, how do we want to proceed with this? Do we want to look at this again, or how do we want to proceed? What is the pleasure of the board, or do we want to talk it out a little bit? Or do you need a moment to wrap your head around it and we talk about it in May? If you're saying something, you're on mute. Joyce can.
I said what I've said what I could say. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, and I added in the chat, I mean, my HR team raised the concerns that, you know, many of these specialist type positions, I mean, everything's in short supply. And so any barrier to hiring them, and for people who've come through without that particular course, it's again, just one more barrier. I do think, now I think in all cases, I kind of like the idea of bringing people on and then training them. So not having the barrier to them being hired, because particularly in an era where you know, everything we're in short supply. It's consistent with what I said before about the portfolio-based assessment. It's like, let's not have barriers to getting them, you know, across the line, but you know, we could have something that would be an expectation where perhaps within 3 years of, you know, having a position or something like that, that we could add these local requirements that in a time of shortage when we're, you know, now in Hartford, I border just one other state, you know, my neighbor borders 2 states. I mean, we all have these sorts of things. So, I mean, the idea of having high standards is good, but I like the idea of it getting people in the door and then, you know, creating a window of time where they can get up to speed for some of that.
Okay, so with that being said, and then Dr. Bolson, remember when we're virtual, you can't put things in the chat because when we're live stream, people can't see it. So just come off of mute and just say it. No worries. So
I just wanted to endorse the fact that, yeah, I mean, Kelly said we might have a concern. I was just agreeing at the moment. So sure, okay.
So it sounds like our May agenda can be kind of, it's a little full. So can we, if we have time in May, kind of start the discussion, but realistically put it on the June agenda? Does that work for everybody? And that gives everyone time to kind of go back to their constituent groups. And, you know, like Dr. Bolson said, this is definitely a concern to just go back and just see, like, what does it look like statewide? Let's bring those concerns. Let's start having that robust discussion. So we'll put that on there for the June agenda. Kelly, proper term would be the specialist and special ed requirement. What's the proper, because I don't want to say social workers, because it's not just social workers. What is it?
It would be the specialist and the administrators and supervisors, or one or the other. It doesn't have to be all of those things, but right now the requirement is for every single specialist area in Chapter 4 and every specialist supervisor area in Chapter 5. Okay, so what I could potentially do, Melita, is in May, if we have time to start the discussion, I could bring some potential options. So maybe not the regulatory language, but, you know, option 1, we take it out for specialists and embed it in a different way in the renewal requirements. Option 2, we do that for everybody. Option 3, you know, so I can bring some options if
I think that works. And then that way we can kind of just start the discussion, but know that we're not going to end the discussion in May. I think it's a starting the discussion and then have it ongoing the next couple of months.
That would be very helpful, Kelly. That was going to be my question, is what are our options? So I appreciate that. That would be helpful.
Great. We're a little ahead on our agenda, but not much. But I always like to build in a little bit of break. So let's go into the military reciprocity and then take a break after that. Was that work for everyone? I want to make sure we've all been sitting. Everybody needs to stand break. If your Apple Watch is probably going off, it's time to stand. So let's go through the military reciprocity and then we'll take a short break after that. Is that fair? Cool. All right. And as a military wife, I'm super excited about this.
Let me share my screen. If you have paper documents in front of you, we're going to be talking about, there's 2 documents that I provided. One is a September 28th, 2023 memorandum to our, it's actually to several constituencies from Mohammed Chowdhury, and it's called the Veterans Auto and Education Improvement Act of 2022. So I'm gonna share that in just a minute. And then there is another attachment that is the federal law itself, which I'm not going to get too deep into. Going to try to make this user friendly. All righty. Can everyone see my screen? Thank you. All right, let's make it nice and big. Okay. So in January of 2023, the what was called the Service Member Civil Relief Act, which is codified in federal regulation, provides service members and their families a wide variety of resources. And one of those things that that it does is it provides license reciprocity, not just for teachers, but for a lot of different types of licenses. And so the MSDE worked with our sister agencies when we became aware of this provision that is newer than the Relief Act itself. And so there were many offices in several agencies that had to quickly realign with this provision, us being one of them. So what the provision says is that if you are a service member or the spouse of a service member, and you have a professional license in another state or certificate, whatever they call it in that state, in another state, and you have to relocate due to military orders, that there are circumstances in which we will recognize that out-of-state credential as a Maryland credential in a nutshell. And there are 5 criteria. So 1, you have moved to a location that's outside of the jurisdiction that issued the license. So I'm going to do an example. Let's say that you are stationed in Virginia and you have a Virginia teaching license, professional teaching license, and and you're the spouse of someone in the military, service member, and you are you move to Maryland. So you move to Maryland, you're up in Harford County, at Aberdeen Proving Grounds, and so that's kind of number 1, right? You've been relocated. You're no longer in Virginia, and you have a Virginia professional license. So what you need to do is you need to come to the Maryland State Department of Education and you need to provide a copy of your military orders and a copy of your Virginia license so that we can see what you have. You also have to have actively used that license, that Virginia license, within 2 years of the move. And we have a form for that. So you document that you were employed in a way that utilized that license. actively within the 2 years preceding the move, and you remain in good standing, not only with Virginia, but there's no disciplinary action on any other professional educator license, and we have a clearinghouse to check that information. So that's 1 through 4. And then 5, you do have to submit to the new licensing authority if, later, if there are any renewal requirements, continuing professional development requirements, you would have to still meet those. It's just to get in. So what MSD has done is we have developed an enhancement to our licensure application system. And so if you have had the opportunity to apply lately, you'll see that there always has been a military tab as part of our application because we've always expedited military applications, but now we not only expedite them, but we look for this as well. So we've built out that tab. It's a new part of the application. There are documents on our website that where the individual can verify their license, that they're in good standing, they attest. There's some attestation involved, and they submit all of this documentation, and in return, we give them a comparable professional license. And so that is now a way in and a pathway to licensure per the federal provision. As such, we need to update our regulations because although we're doing it and it's advertised on our website, our regulation should be aligned with this provision. So when I think it was a couple months ago, I said, we're going to bring this language at some point. So I'd like that some point to be May. So in May, we're going to have a full agenda because one of the things that I would like to tackle is the language to add this pathway into the licensure regulations. And with that, I am happy to attempt to answer any questions you may have.
Kelly, this is Chris. Quick question. So you used your example of Virginia. I just want to make sure it doesn't have anything to do with reciprocity, right? Like they could come from a military base in Texas for that first, right? Like I just want to make sure I'm understanding that correctly. It doesn't, like reciprocity plays 0 into this situation.
So this is kind of like its own provision of reciprocity.
Okay. So any military base across the U.S., you come in, you taught for that state for 2 years, you do the paperwork, you should be okay to transfer in and have your license be accepted here in Maryland.
So a couple points of clarification. One, it's not necessarily associated with a base.
Okay.
It is a military order. You are relocated.
Got it.
So I don't want to get too nitpicky. It's more general than that.
So like you have the, in terms of like military stuff, so thinking more terms of deployment, sometimes they consider them like short-term or long-term, and they come very quickly. And so speaking to, other military spouses, this is very exciting because typically when the spouse gets orders to go to another duty station, which could be a base or it could be someplace else, they're going through like your typical process of seeking out a new licensure in that state, and it can be very lengthy. And sometimes you don't have the amount of time it takes. So, and please forgive me because I'm thinking more terms of military wives. They are relocating and then they have to wait because they're going through everything before they can start, looking for employment. So this is a huge win. Because sometimes orders come, like you could get the information today and the spouse or the husband has to report sometimes like May 15th. That's a very quick turnaround to get everything done.
Yeah, this is great. I don't come from a military family, so this is all very new to me. I don't know what this looks like. So it sounds amazing. And I'm just glad we're doing this.
So they're super excited from this, or like if they're in like California or different places like that, to know that, this is in place and how easy it is for Maryland. I mean, I do have friends that are coming from other states, and they have always spoke very highly at how quickly things are processed and they're ready to go for the state of Maryland.
Oh my gosh. Thanks for that personal point of view and also for your husband's service. Thank you.
Yeah, orders come and it's like a 30 or 45 day turnaround, and you're trying to do a house and get all that stuff together. So yes, this is amazing and super exciting for military or active duty military, as well as their spouses.
The other part, Dr. Miggy, that I just wanted to make sure that I clarified is it is not required to have 2 years of service or teaching service, education service
Okay.
preceding the move, you have to have actively used your credential within the 2 years preceding the move. That doesn't mean, full-time, 2 full years. So again, it's more general than that.
So it's even more open. So you've really made this just so amazing for these folks to be able to have.
I can't take credit. President Biden signed it.
I mean, I love it. I love when we can do anything for our military. And it just makes me so happy and so proud. So thank you for the clarity. I appreciate it.
Sure. Any other questions surrounding this? Right. Seeing no questions. I have 1047 on my watch, looking at the agenda. I think we're good. Let's just take a really quick break. Let's do, we need 10 minutes or like 7 minutes? I don't know what's going on today. I'm used to us having these huge, robust discussions. It's like, that day and, the class is just quiet. Like,
You know what? If you ask us to debate it, we'll waste 3 minutes. So you decide and we'll adhere.
10:55,
All right,
we'll come back.
It's 10:47. Let's come back at 10:55. That works? Okay, let's come back at 10:55. All right, quick break. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back.
Melita,
Yes,
can I ask another quick question?
yes.
Kelly, if you're bringing back the options in May, I'm just trying to play it forward. If you're bringing back the options in May for anything with this regulation, what do you think realistically the turnaround time would be if something was changed, just because of hiring in, coming up now in June, May and June?
Well, if we discuss in May and a decision is made in the June meeting and it's taken to the state board in June. So this is ideal, right? This is like pie in the sky.
Right.
And it goes to, if we're really quick about getting it to the register. Elliot, do you know how long it usually takes to register to publish something after we send it? I feel like it's at least a month.
Give yourself about 100 days on the best case scenario.
Wow.
Between the board approving for publication, going out, getting through AELR, getting through the DSD, getting it published in the register, getting it back, addressing any comments that have come in, going back to the board and PSTEB, and then going through approval.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to
longer.
know.
It's longer for us than for most regs because there's two boards.
Right. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you very much.
All right. Looks like we're ready to move forward with those blueprint priorities, kind of like a check-in. Where are we with everything? So we're going to move forward with our blueprint priorities.
Okay. So one of the attachments that I sent is entitled, it's titled Professional Standards and Teacher Education Board Blueprint Priorities. This is actually a document that I just updated. It's something that we discussed closer to what probably sometime in late 2021. And before we get into it, I just want to clarify that the only things you're going to find on this document have to do with this particular subtitle and what was originally a part of the statutes that we call the blueprint. There are other areas of Maryland statute that talk about the Professional Standards Board, the statutes that establish the Professional Standards Board and actually lay out the charge of the Professional Standards Board is not a part of this. I just want to be clear that this is not the totality of your work, but the request was to kind of hone in on blueprint. So that's what we have here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. Okay. And then what I've done is I've just added at the end of each of the summaries, I've added an update regarding like kind of where we are. So the first statute is 6-120. And this is where all of the language lives. It talks about the practicum, mentors, all of that ed prep stuff, that like the meat of it really. It's 120, 121. The 121 is really where it lists out all like the topics that have to be embedded into the program. But 120 is really the crux of I think the framework of educator preparation. So this is absolutely what we tackled with COMAR 13A0706. Programs for professionally licensed personnel. I have a typo here. I'm gonna ignore that. So we're in a good place for this. Now, of course, every legislative session brings changes, and this is one of the things that will have to change if Senate Bill 771 is signed into law, which is what we anticipate. So one of the things that we'll have to change is in our ed prep regulations, we will have to go in and amend the section about the performance, the portfolio-based performance assessment. So I have here that we've completed this, but this work is ongoing because this is part of the work. So anytime this board or the state board feels like these regulations need to be updated, or there's legislation that updates these requirements and we have to realign the regulations, we will do so. And this is exactly what will happen next month when I bring some of these changes having to do with Senate Bill 771. Similar 6-121, again, this is the law that lists all of those areas of instruction that need to be embedded into our educator preparation programs. We have embedded them into our regulations. They are a part of 13A0706. And so I have also listed this as completed, but again, our work is always ongoing. Next, and I just kind of pulled out like the highlights where, you know, the Professional Standards Board is named. So the next place that it's named, 6-1002, the state board, in consultation with the Professional Standards Board, shall approve a program of study for teachers pursuing the master's equivalent option in level 2 of the career ladder. And we tackled this in the licensure regulations. We aligned the advanced professional license, that master's equivalent option to get that advanced professional license is aligned with this language. And so we utilize, the state board and the Professional Standards Board utilize those regulations to have an approved course of study. And I believe we ended up with 30 credits. I'd have to pull out the licensure regulations. So I've listed this as completed. Next, we have 6-1006. This is another in consultation with, so the state board has purview, but must consult with the Professional Standards Board to establish the criteria that a teacher shall meet to achieve the licensed principal tier of the career ladder, and establish a process through which an individual may receive a waiver to serve as a licensed principal if they are not a nationally board certified teacher. So in a nutshell, what the law says is by, I believe, 2028, a licensed principal must also hold a national board certificate. But the law also states that there's going to be this criteria that is established to move to that licensed principal tier. And with that criteria is a built-in waiver. So who is waived? Is there a waiver? What does that look like? All of that work can take place at the same time. And this is completely linked to the licensure requirements for principal. So we are tackling all of this together because, as you know, the license requirements for principal is absolutely the purview of this board, not just in consultation with. So we have invited a group of individuals, and I'm just waiting on one organization, and then we'll be able to move forward. But we have asked a number of organizations to be represented in this group. We're calling it the Administrator Licensure Work Group. And what that group will do is they will not only, so these are expert administrators from different constituencies will come together. They will not only make recommendations regarding what the licensure requirements should be for an administrator to or principal, but we will also use the opportunity of having these experts together to make recommendations to the state board, who will then consult with the Professional Standards Board on that criteria to move to the licensed principal tier and the waiver, if any, if there's a waiver process associated with that particular movement. So we will tackle all of that work. It should begin in May. I anticipate that we'll have 3 or 4 meetings and we'll come back with recommendations to both boards.
Have you reached out to BZAM for a rep?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I wasn't aware. I'll make sure that have we followed up?
Yes, Mary Pat's aware.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure that we have one on there. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Nope, I think we can keep going, Kelly.
All right. So I have noted that this is in progress. Next, we have 6-1013, the state board in consultation with the Professional Standards Board and the AIB shall adopt regulations to carry out this subtitle. So before, when I said at the very end of this subtitle, there's this language that says anything in this subtitle, there needs to be consultation. This is where that lives. It's 6-1013. So I've just provided a very, very, very brief overview of the subtitle. I mean, this is 3 paragraphs. The subtitle is mammoth. So I didn't really get into the weeds here, but everyone here is familiar with the blueprint and the pillars of the blueprint, the goals of the blueprint, and that's really what this is about. So this, in a nutshell, is our priorities. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, clarification questions, comments, concerns? So Kelly, I know we've spoke about this before, but now that we have our priorities, what are our next steps? Can we kind of go back to that? So now, because I think we were talking about this, I believe at the last meeting, it could have been February meeting, but what are our next steps? Because we have a lot of things coming up. We know we're discussing a little bit for our May meeting, but in terms of looking at our priorities, how does this connect with our next steps as a board?
Mm-hmm. So I think that one of the number one priorities has to be to realign to the 24 legislative session. So I know we're still waiting on the governor's signature or to see if, what rolls into law, and until that is finalized, we won't have a definite answer other than for what Laurel had already shared had already been signed. But, that is happening now and will happen by the end of May. So it's really important for us to be quick about realigning, because what we don't want, and you heard what Elliot said, we're already planning for 100 days, right? Even if we are Johnny on the spot, which we should be. So my goal is anything from, like, for instance, the Senate Bill 771, absolutely know that we are going to have to update our regulations. I can have that language to you to align to the law in May. My goal is to have this board vote in May so that I can take it to the state board in May, because we want the priority to be to lessen the amount of time, lessen as much as possible the amount of time where our statute and our regulatory language does not align, because that causes confusion. It causes confusion for LEAs, it causes confusion for EVPs, it causes confusion for my staff, it causes confusion for the candidates and applicants. So although we can certainly update our website and we can provide technical assistance, when you go to the source and there's 2 sources and they say different things, that's what we need to update as soon as possible. So for me, I would say that our number one priority is to realign with the law based on whatever we see in June at the end of this session. Aside from that, and again, still aligning to the law, right? The military changes, aligning to the federal law. We can do all of that together. As far as, I think that the special ed coursework is a great example, right? Our work is ongoing. So although we're always going to have something, we have 8 chapters of regulation that we just adopted. I'm still, and my staff is still finding errors and things that need to be clarified, because we finally have it out and we have a lot of feedback. Oh, that's not so clear. And you could have made this clearer, or, oh, that's an error. We're citing the wrong regulation. All of those things we should continue to do. That work is not done. And then, of course, there's all the administrators and specialists. So that's one work group at a time. So we're starting with the administrators, but, we have our list of ranked priorities. These are the ones that haven't been amended and the longest, and we feel are really out of date. We have to bring those work groups together, and those work groups have to make recommendations to this board. So, we have a lot of work in front of us. I don't think I have any more specifics than that.
Thank you. Sandy?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just a little slow to process something, Kelly. So I just wanted to ask a question. So, back to the last one you talked about, the 6-1013 about the career ladder. So, am I mistaken in thinking that in the past we talked about that was going to be the LEA's responsibility to figure out like what the who was qualified for which level of the career ladder? Is that something that we're looking at? I'm sorry.
Sure, no, it's all very detailed. So the career ladder is so like this is one little piece of what is a very large amount of work when we refer to the career ladder for educators. There is one specific tier on the career ladder that is not as defined as the others. The others, really, the law is very prescriptive about this is what you need in order to move to this level. These are the qualifications. A lot of it has to do with, is the assignment available? Is there a recommendation from the principal? Like it's all in the law. For this particular tier, what it says is the language that I showed you, is that the state board will develop criteria in consultation with the accountability and implementation board, as well as the professional standards board. Will the LEAs be involved in that process? Absolutely. That's why they're a part of the work group that we're bringing together to make recommendations. So really, yes. And that is to also say that at the end of the day, the career ladders are the LEA career ladders. And each career ladder is going to be, I think, somewhat unique, and Dr. Bolson can correct me if he disagrees, but I think somewhat unique because every district has different needs. And so they're all doing this same work internally. How it all looks in the end, I think is going to look a little bit different depending on the LEA that you're employed in. There's nothing in the law that prevents an LEA from doing more. Right? The law is like the framework. And then it's up to the local education agency to design that career ladder so that it works for them. But for this particular tier, Sandy, the law does say that the state board will establish criteria in consultation.
Thank you, Kelly.
If I could just editorialize for 1 second. I mean, right now, from what I'm hearing from my colleagues, there still aren't any good ideas out there. All 24 districts are trying to find something that complies with the law, but no one's finding anything that benefits their school system. And so if there is a way to expand the conversation here, obviously not today, but as we dig into this, I would say this is among the most problematic elements of the blueprint and the one that is, creating the most heartburn among my colleagues. So anything we can do to engage in conversations and bring in more guidance, I think would help a lot. Now, I know we talked earlier about not being a guidance place, but this is one of the places where it overlaps a little.
So, and Kelly, just thinking out loud, just to kind of clarify. So, Dr. Bolson said that many of the LEAs are kind of struggling like with this, and I know we discussed this before. But in terms of that, would that be in PSTEB's purview to just, because I know we've talked about the career ladder in detail with different things and the national board and the percentages and all that, but would that be in our purview to have that discussion? Would that impact our work with the regulations? So I want to make sure we're staying in our purview versus having a conversation, and I don't want it to come across in terms of this was talked about in the PSTEB meeting, and maybe this is how MSDE is leaning towards it or anything like it. Would that be? I want to make sure we're staying in our purview, but I think I need a little bit of clarification with that if we had that conversation, because we know that this is impacting the LEAs, but I just want to make sure we're on target with our conversation.
There is nothing that prevents this board from having whatever discussion you feel is appropriate for this board. So you're welcome to have a discussion about the career ladder.
Okay. So Dr. Bolson, we'll circle back to the career ladder. We will come back to it. All right. Was there anything else with the blueprint priorities? Any other questions, concerns? All right. Moving on to the COMAR clarifications and corrections.
Okay. So if you are looking at paper documents, we are looking at 13A, subtitle 12, educator licensure. And what I've done here is I have I've noted what is new. I've added on to the corrections and the clarifications that we've already made in previous meetings and I believe it was in February that this board already provided permission to publish. So these are additional corrections and clarifications that I'd like to share with you. And if the board is in agreement, I will bring them back in May as a request to publish, and we will add them to what we already have agreed to publish. So we're going to start on page 6. These are just 2 that we've already agreed to publish in February. So I'm going to roll by those. I'm going to concentrate on the ones that are new. February. Okay, so let's start on page 19. So this, and the reg itself starts on page, or the section itself starts on page 18. So this is the work-based learning coordinator endorsement. This is a teaching endorsement. It's one of those endorsements that you can't have unless you already have another teaching endorsement. And what we realized is at the bottom in 5C4, we inadvertently left out the word or. And so, and it was an omission. It used to read, because I copied and pasted these from the old regulations. It used to read completes 3 semester hours of content coursework in contemporary workplace practices taken at an accredited institution of higher education or through CPDs. But the version that we ended up adopting, the or was inadvertently removed. So it read taken at an accredited institution of higher education through CPDs, which doesn't make sense, because they don't issue CPDs, they issue continuing professional development credits. So that was an omission, and I am recommending that we add the or back in. Are there any questions?
Kelly, do we need to take a vote for that, a motion to add that back in, or?
I did not draft a memorandum requesting permission to publish. I was gonna do it next month. I'm just kind of reviewing them today, and then I'll come back. Yes, Elliot.
Just to let you know that I was asked to review that last week about whether that would be a substantive and non-substantive change. And I drafted a memorandum with which is, it's required if you're going to make a change to a regulation that's already been published. My view is that this is a non-substantive change, that no one is going to be affected. No one who reviewed the regulations would be affected by this change. It was just a typo, and you're going back to what is the original language.
Excellent. So this is one less thing that we will have to vote on.
Any questions about the change or about that portion of the regulation? Seeing no, Kelly, I don't think we have any questions for that part.
Okay, I'm trying to find the next one. Okay, next one is on page 42. Supervisor of School Psychological Services. We realized that we inadvertently were pointing to the wrong regulation. It says meets the licensure requirements for as a school psychologist under, and it should point to the school psychologist regulation. And because we had made changes throughout we neglected to go back and align this to the correct regulation. So it's not currently, I think it's pointing to reading teacher instead of school psychologist. So we're just going to update that. Questions? I think there's one more like that. Maybe not. I thought there were two. I missed one. There were definitely two citations that needed to be.
Yeah, I saw it up there, Kelly. Yeah, I didn't think it said February, but then I thought maybe it said February. That is the one I was looking at. It does say February. Yep.
I could have sworn there was another one. It's this one. I'm sorry, I didn't put a comment. It's right here. Same thing. So in this one, we're pointing to the wrong section of the regulation. It should say 3 and instead said 2, again, because we made some changes along the way. And this was one of the places we missed. It's supposed to reference the professional license, which is right on top of it. And instead it references the initial professional, which doesn't make sense. So this is the one I was thinking of.
Elliot, wouldn't those also qualify as non-substantive, those two?
I don't know. To be completely transparent, this last thing that Elliot just talked about that happened last week is the first time that I've ever been through that process. I didn't realize that could happen.
So it can be. I don't know if Sean had already reviewed these.
Just
Okay.
found these within the month.
Okay. I think let's take a look at each one to decide whether it is supported by a non-substantive or does it really change the meaning of something? Does it change the position of anyone who read the regulation when it was published and changed their conduct or expected something, and then this, if it's just inadvertent or it's a typo, it could be non-substantive, which it sounds like this one might be, but we should take a closer look and discuss it, Kelly.
And that's it for corrections for today.
Questions with this? Any other questions? The next item on our agenda is to go into an executive session, but before we do that, I actually want to set the agenda for next meeting. No, wait a minute, wait. No, yeah, that's executive session. Yeah, I want to look at the agenda for next meeting before we go into executive session. So then when we come out, we should be ready to adjourn if that's cool. So for our next meeting, we are scheduled to be in person. We do need a longer meeting. So thinking 9:30, Kelly, you think 9:30 to 1:30 or think 9:30 to 2:30?
I got 9:30 to 2.
Okay, so let's do 9:30 to 2. Yes, we will take a lunch break in between. We're not expecting you just to sit there and not, so we will take a lunch break somewhere in there. We'll have our traditional items, recognizing our guests, public comments, state board update, legislative update, announcements, communication, and our approval of our minutes. The next portion will go into detail with I cannot remember these bill numbers to save my life today. Was it 771? Kelly, we said we were going to talk into detail. Look at that there. If I was playing the lotto, playing that number. 771, and we talked about, we would look into, well, really it was 771, right? That was going to be the main part. And then we'll have wait, are we previewing the language for the military?
I'd like to bring, so these are the things I'd like to bring for permission to publish.
Okay.
The corrections that, if we need them after I talk with Elliot, the corrections we just went through, the military language, and the language that aligns both the licensure and ed prep regs to Senate Bill 771.
Okay. And then was there anything else? I'm sorry, I'm looking back at my notes. Anything else that we said we would table to May? Any outstanding? Oh, let us not forget to kind of keep it just in the forefront of our minds, science of reading. So it may not be ready for next meeting, but I just want to make sure that we kind of keep that in the forefront, that we do have that outstanding item of the science of reading.
I have that scheduled tentatively for June.
Okay. So tentatively.
And we also have we have the Morgan Baltimore City Teacher Collaborative Grant presentation scheduled for May. And I also have a note to have a program approval presentation from my office.
What was that? I remember us talking about that. What was the scope of that presentation?
An overview of the process that was developed to implement the regulations.
Got it. So yeah, we have a full agenda for May. So in June, we said we were coming. So June would be our science of reading. We said we would come back and look at the career ladder in June, have that conversation. Also in May, with the communication update, we'll kind of go back to the practicum requirements. Since Dr. Shockley and Dr. Allen aren't here today. So science of reading, career ladder, anything else you said for June? I just want to make sure that we have it on our agenda for outstanding items so that we don't forget about it. Was there any?
I'm sorry, I had a question on texting, so you may have said this, not for this group, the question, this is school related. Did you say in the May meeting about the regulations, Kelly discussing the options for the specialist regulations?
Oh, yeah. See, that's what I was like, I need to go through.
Okay.
Kelly, will we be able to fit that in the options, or do we need to move that to June?
I think we can fit it.
Okay. So then we have the options for the specialists and the special ed classes or credits, special ed credits.
Yes.
Yeah, special ed credit, the 3
And
credit.
then on the May agenda, we'll have the outstanding items, knowing that we loosely talked about this. Science of reading will be in June, the career ladder, and just in case I missed anything else. All right.
You also say practicum for June?
Well, we're going to discuss it next month because I know that Dr. Allen and Dr. Shockley had some that they wanted to bring into it, but it can be an ongoing discussion. So if you don't get through enough of it, or just because we have such a packed agenda, if we need to kind of table the discussion because of time, we can always discuss it again in June.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, Melita, in June, depending on this executive session and how the board feels, I would like to bring back the disciplinary action regulations for permission to publish.
Okay. Okay. Cool. All right. So since we have our agenda set for next meeting, I need a motion to rise to executive session to get the advice of counsel.
So move. Dr. Taylor.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. We need to second it.
It's Chris, I'll second.
Thank you. Dr. McGee will second. And so all in favor, can we do hands, Kelly, since it's not that many of us? Can you just kind of raise your hand close to your head so we can see it? Looks like it is a unanimous vote to rise into executive session. So I think we wait. Kelly, do we have to go in another room or we just stop the live stream and recording?
Nope, I sent everybody an invite for another room, and this one will continue to live stream.
Okay.
Chair Kitchen,
Yes.
before you go off live stream, you might want to give anyone who is watching a sense of how long you'll be in closed session, and so they know when to come back on.
I don't know.
I would say 25, 30 minutes tops.
Thank you, Kelly, because I'm like, I have no idea how long this discussion is going to take. So for the live stream, we'll be back in this session in about 25, 30 minutes.
So will the invite pop up on our page?
No, it's check your email.
Oh, got it. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
From when did we get that email? Oh no, you're on mute.
She just sent it maybe like 3 minutes ago or something.
Okay, I'll refresh again. Let me see. Wasn't on there.
I was gonna say, is it attached to the same email she sent originally? Is it
No,
in that?
she sent a brand new
No,
email.
it's a new email.
It's a brand new email. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. My email's slow like me.
You know.
You move at just the right pace.
What is going on here?
So mine came through, I had to accept a response, and then it's actually a Google Meet link for me. I guess for all of you too, but it's a totally different link.
that we get that summarize the executive session content.
Okay.
Debbie, I don't think you're muted on the Zoom call. It says that she is. Definitely has to see that.
Look, I'll go back and check. I thought I did. Hold on.
But certainly, our view is our view, and you can share you can summarize it in your own words. I just wouldn't share the exact memo. Or if you're going to take notes from what I'm about to share, which is my summary of Sean's memo, you can certainly share that. I mean, the reason you went into closed session is so you can protect these conversations. And seeking legal advice, you should hold it as closely.
You could send anything that's confidential, a reminder that it's just not to go on. It's just for inside, because I often will send all, just forward your email, but I happen to just think, oh, I wonder if I'm not supposed to that, but I might not think that the next time when you send it. So if you could just send it separately or make a big note at the top saying, remember, this document number 4 attachment is only for us. Oh, thanks.
Before I get started, Kelly, is there anything you want to lead in before I get started?
Because it's been a couple months since we had this discussion, and I just want to remind everybody kind of what brought us here, which is Sean and I presented recommended amendments to disciplinary action regulations, and they were twofold. Part of it was the definitions, and then that's kind of like, and the other part was developing, codifying the process to implement the state government article that allows state entities to suspend a license under certain circumstances for public safety. And that's the second part of the license memo. And there were some questions about the language. And so we stopped that discussion. We were going to pick it up the next month. And at that point, in the next month, we had public comment. MSCA's attorney who shared shared a letter with some.
That's actually pretty helpful to me because it gives turpitude and misconduct, which are absent
Why I
from
keep doing
regulation.
this?
And
Jumping up. Huh? You can hear it. That's because my thing keep jumping up. I'm like, why does it keep jumping up? No, you're not. It's just it's my computer.
I think PSTEB forgot about us.
I believe they're still in executive session, so they'll send an email for folks to log back on. I just checked with Nicole, so we can just stay on and then I'll let Simba know when to stop the live stream.
Okay, was having a little bit of technical difficulty there. So we are now back. We are back into our open session. And so the purpose of we ended our executive session at 12:29. The purpose of our executive session was to consult with counsel to obtain legal advice as to the definitions of moral turpitude and misconduct under Maryland law in the context of educator licensure and legal authority for summary suspensions of educator licenses under state government article 10-226. All right. Actions, there was no actions taken as we were, sorry. There were no actions taken as if we were just gaining legal counsel and education from counsel in terms of the 2 terms. All right. So we are out of executive session. We've summarized what we talked about in executive session. And now as chair, we will entertain a motion to adjourn our meeting.
I move to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Garten.
Second, Dr. Taylor.
By Dr. Taylor, without objection, we will adjourn our April meeting. Thank you.
Bye. See you in May.
See you in May.
Thank you.